Today on the Mike Rogers Show, Mike Rogers here with you. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a true rock and roll star. He's an original member and still member of the massively famous band Blondie. I think you've heard of them. After many tours and hit records in March of 2006, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame along with the band Blondie and members. So won't you welcome the one, the only original member of Blondie, superstar drummer Clem Burke. Yay! Clem!
Oh, wow. Hey, Mike. How are you? That was quite an introduction.
How are you?
I'm well.
I've been looking forward to this interview since we set it up, which was like, I don't know, 3 days ago or something like that.
Yeah, it's been in the works for a while because I'm going to be heading over to Japan next year.
Yeah, I'll be at the show.
Okay,
in Tokyo.
Cool.
So, first, before we get into this, I want to ask you a question. Did you and I meet at Rodney Bingenheimer's when he was on K-Rock in 1978? Because I was told we did.
There's a good chance of that. I mean, we used to go to the studio and visit Rodney around that time, for sure. I mean, Rodney was instrumental in breaking Blondie in the United States, as you well know.
Yeah.
He was actually around my place for Thanksgiving this year.
Really?
Yeah, but I was in Mallorca, but my wife hosted, and Rodney was one of the guests.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So
yeah,
at the time when I was there, the Ramones were there. And members of my band said, "Do you know who that other guy is?" And I was like, no. And they said, sorry. They said, that's Clem Burke. That's Clem Burke. And I was like,
that's possible. I mean, I used to hang out at the studio and visit Rodney quite often when I was in town.
So that would mean that we haven't met in 44 years.
Wow, it's
unbelievable. The first time in 44 years.
Right.
So, okay, so Clem, can you just give us a brief introduction of yourself, your own self-introduction?
Well, I'm Clem Burke, founding member of the group Blondie. I've had a very long career in the music business, and it's really, I'm kind of writing a memoir at the moment called The Other Side of the Dream, which is basically what I've been living, because we had this dream of having success or having a record deal. I mean, the goalpost was always changing. And I've managed to stay in the music business for quite some time, as you mentioned, and went on to play with my friends Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart in Eurythmics in the 80s. We won a Grammy for the song Missionary Man. And I just came back from Mallorca, where I presented my documentary that was commissioned by Sky Arts called Clem Burke, My View. And I did a Q&A in Mallorca.
Mm-hmm.
I get Monaco and Mallorca mixed up sometimes. Both beautiful places. And I mean, we've just completed a new Blondie album that'll be out next year, and big plans afoot for 2023 with Blondie, and just keep going. It's kind of what I do.
Well, that's really great. Can I ask you how was it that you first got into Blondie? I mean, did Deborah Harry just call you up and say, "Hey, Clem, you want to be in our band," or what?
Well, no. I mean, it goes back to the mid 70s. There was a place in New York City called Club 82, which was kind of the glam rock headquarters in the early 70s. Bands like the New York Dolls would play there, and David Bowie and Lou Reed would hang out there. And one night a week, they would have rock and roll shows. And I had a band called Sweet Revenge, and we would play there occasionally. And Debbie and Chris Stein had the band called the Stilettos, and they would play there, and we would cross paths that way. And famously, they put a little ad in the back of the newspaper, The Village Voice, that I answered, knowing full well that it was the two of them that had put the ad in. And we just kind of met and had a conversation, and one thing led to another from there. And as soon as I joined Blondie, our bass player, a guy called Fred Smith, left to join the band Television, and so I brought in my high school mate, a guy called Gary Valentine, who co-wrote our first single, Ex Offender, and we just went from there.
Oh, I love that song.
Yeah,
I really, from the first music book I ever bought, I mean, sheet music book,
Okay.
was about punk rock, and it had Ex Offender in it and Ripper to Shreds.
All right. Sure. Yeah.
And
They're both from our first album.
Yeah.
Ex Offender was the first single.
I learned how to play them on the piano.
Oh, wow.
Those were the first punk songs I ever learned how to play.
Great.
So,
Well, they both have keyboards in them as well. So
yeah. So you met them at a coffee shop. Did you have to have an audition or anything like
no, I answered I met them in the they had a little studio on West 30th Street, a couple of blocks south of Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
And I met up there with them, and we just kind of had a chat. And I think they liked my shoes, which is kind of why I got in the band, I think.
So now with Blondie, when did you realize when you were in with Blondie, you were playing for Blondie, were you only playing for Blondie, or were you playing in several bands like you do now?
Well, actually, I was also working with a guy called Lance Loud in a band called the Mumps. That kind of my decision was made to not continue working with Lance and the Mumps due to the fact that with Blondie, we had gotten an album deal. Prior to that, we just had a single out, and I was still, working around with other musicians around New York City at the same time. But I soon thereafter concentrated on just my work with Blondie.
You joined Blondie, you got a record deal. When did you realize that you had won the lottery?
Well, I mean, the fame comes much quicker than the money. I think anyone in the music business knows. I mean, we signed to an independent label. We signed to a production deal with a guy called Richard Goddard, who produced our first two albums. Richard was a product of the Brill Building. He was a hit songwriter. He wrote a song called My Boyfriend's Back. He was also in a band, The Strange Loves, and he did the songs Nighttime. And famously, he wrote I Want Candy, that was later covered by Bow Wow Wow.
Yeah.
And Richard produced our first two albums, and we had a production deal with him. And he brought us to an independent label called Private Stock.
Mm-hmm.
And so our first album was released on Private Stock, and we did a tour opening for Iggy Pop and David Bowie in 1977.
Wow.
Iggy had the album The Idiot released, and David was in his band playing keyboards, and we were invited to be the opening act on a U.S. national tour. So that was our first tour that we did while we were on Private Stock.
I remember that.
Sure. We played Santa Monica Civic.
Yeah, you played Santa Monica Civic. That's right.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't even know you were in the band then.
Yeah. Yeah. The band kind of started when I brought my mate Gary Valentine in. That was the genesis of Blondie, as began to have a recording career and things like that. And I mean, as far as hitting the lottery, we just worked very hard for a long time, and we were just having fun. I mean, but when we were recording our second album called Plastic Letters, under the auspices of Private Stock was funding the record, but our manager at the time, Peter Leeds, was negotiating a record deal and a buyout with a record label called Chrysalis Records.
You're right.
So, and then although we were recording Plastic Letters for Private Stock, it was wound up being released on Chrysalis, and there was a buyout involved, and so we kind of went in debt for about $1 million due to our buyouts from the production deal and the record deal. So the Chrysalis paid a lot of money for the group, but none of it really came to the band. So it took a while to really see the money coming in, but we were having a good time. But I try to appreciate my success to this day, and I really do appreciate it. And but it took a while to really. Once we got really successful is when we broke up. Unfortunately, success kind of ruined the band in some ways. I mean, we were all working together prior, but it's amazing to think now that Chris, Debbie, and I have been together longer this time around than we were the first time around when we reformed in '98. So, I mean, I've had a good run. I get to play with a lot of other great musicians, and I enjoy what I do. It beats working,
Yes.
It's why they call it playing.
I think so. So, tell me about the first time that Blondie broke up? Were you guys fighting, or what was the problem?
There was some acrimony within the band, and also one of the members, Chris Stein, got very ill, and in 1982, and I think we just needed to take a break, but instead we kind of split apart. The company stayed intact, and we never really dissolved our companies that we had together, but the band wasn't functioning for a very long time. But we did a lot of work, and really kind of, which was the foundation for our success. But once we had the real success and the money started rolling in, we seemed to have a less of a work ethic amongst the band as an entirety. So, a good example of that was you remember the US Festival that was put on by the Microsoft guy, not Gates, the other guy from Microsoft. Anyhow, when they had the so-called New Wave day at that show, and it was like the Ramones, the Pretenders, Talking Heads, the Police, Elvis Costello, and the Attractions. And we were offered to headline that show that day. And so when you look at the list, when you see the list, the only band missing is Blondie. And it was kind of a bad decision not to do the US Festival, but it was symptomatic of the problems we were having within the band. But it's hard to say if we would have had if things didn't work out the way they did, if we would have had all the success that we did have. It's hard to believe we had 4 #1 hits in the US and about maybe 5 #1s in the UK and other places around the world. We were very, very successful.
Very, very successful. Yeah. So
and then it kind of all went south for a while.
But I'm just this is just conjecture on my part. You're not really the type of guy who would get involved in fights and stuff, would you? Are you? No.
I try to take care of business, in general.
Yeah.
There was just kind of the success. It was hard for people to deal with the success on a lot of levels. And for me, everything was just going according to plan. I was very happy about it. But when did I realize I hit the lottery? I don't know. Maybe I realize it these days, nowadays. But
so you've also been, I don't know, did you win a Grammy or you were Grammy nominated?
We were nominated for a Grammy for Call Me. But I did win a Grammy for my work with the Eurythmics with a song called Missionary Man. But Blondie are nominated for a Grammy this year. We just released an archival box that I gifted Rodney one.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and that's nominated for, I think they call it Best Historical Release, because it's an archival thing. So we're nominated for a Grammy this year for the archival box that we're all really happy with, that finally got released, because it was a long time coming. It's called Against the Odds, and it was kind of based on that title. That I kind of came up with that title based on all the insanity that was happening in the world over the last couple of years, with the pandemic and everything. And also it really is against the odds to have any kind of real success in show business. As I'm sure you well know, the odds are very small of having any kind of longevity and any kind of real success, or a long shelf life, which the music with Blondie, it's our legacy, and people seem to enjoy the music. And it kind of, I think we're just starting to go out of style a little bit now, but I think for a long time. Well, that's good that you think that. For a long time, we kind of assumed that we were ahead of the curve. That's a lot of that's attributed to all the groundwork that we laid back in the day. When you see pictures of us from the 70s and 80s, it looks like modern. It looks like today.
Yeah.
It's not like we don't have poodle haircuts. Real early on, Chris and I had long hair, but and Debbie's image obviously was a fantastic image and a door opener for the group in general.
Yeah. So you are a Hall of Fame member,
right?
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member. When that was announced, you must have been on top of the world. How did you feel? How was it announced? How did you find out? Did you get an email?
Funny enough, I was in an internet cafe, if you remember those things.
They still have them in Japan.
Oh, okay. In London, I was in an internet cafe with my wife in the morning, and I was just looking up the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame result, because it was due to be mentioned that day. And that's how I found out. I found out online, and I went to it was funny because the internet cafe was kind of quiet, and we started whooping and hollering like kind of loud Americans in the internet cafe. And I was the one that broke the news to everyone else in the band. We were doing a sound check at
Really?
Hammersmith Odeon at the time. Yeah, we were on tour when we got the news, so it was pretty fantastic. Funny thing is, I've kind of been associated with 4 bands that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that I've actually worked with. I mean, I just recently filled in for my friend Gina Schock with the Go-Go's. They just did a tour with the Go-Go's around February. And
I heard about that.
The Go-Go's have been inducted this year, and also last year. And this year, Annie and Dave, Eurythmics, have been inducted, who I also played with for quite some time. And then the Ramones obviously were inducted, and I played with the Ramones briefly as Elvis from
Elvis, yes,
nom de plume. And so I've worked with 4 bands that have been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So that's pretty amazing to me.
Isn't that like a Guinness Book of World Records thing?
It could possibly be.
Can you check? Can you check? Or maybe I'll check for you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've been the drummer in 4 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame bands. So
wow, and
yeah, that's pretty interesting.
And you got a doctorate of music from the University of Chichester.
Yeah, Chichester University. I just recently got that one. Yeah,
you just recently.
But several years ago, I also received a doctorate from another university in the UK, Gloucestershire University. It's for my work with the so-called Clem Burke drumming project, which is the mental and physical study of drumming, basically. And it just kind of progressed over the years. It was supposed to be just kind of a one-off thing that was started by a guy called Dr. Marcus Smith at Chichester University. He was the Olympic boxing coach for the UK boxing team.
Oh.
And he was keen to make the comparison and make the analogy between sport and drumming, which is kind of an obvious connection in a lot of ways, especially rock and roll drumming. So it was supposed to be a one-off thing. And he met with me. We were playing at Wembley Arena many years ago, and he wrote me a letter, and we met up there. And so then he started to experiment on me, wire me up, take my heart rate, my oxygen levels during the shows. Went up to his lab and did a lot of aerobic exercises and drumming. And so it led to he having a thesis about all this. And so it's been ongoing. It's still ongoing, Clem Burke drumming project. Many other people are involved now. I'm kind of the figurehead of it. But that's why I got the 2 doctorates so far, 2 doctorates in counting.
Whenever when you say I got a doctorate of music, in my head I hear do 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 do.
Yeah, the pomp and circumstance, right? Yeah, and I had to wear those ridiculous gowns and hats. It's very formal, especially in the UK. It's kind of a Chichester University, which the graduation ceremony was in a kind of a medieval church. That was just a few months back.
Yeah.
Then we had a party. They had a party for me at the university where my friends Bootleg Blondie actually were the band, a Blondie tribute band from the UK played at the party. So that was fun.
Yeah, I was reading about Bootleg Blondie, and I thought, wow, this is you're playing in Blondie, but you also play in Bootleg.
Somewhat
Blondie.
Controversial. Yeah, it was just for fun. I did a tour with them and donated all the money to charity to a charity called Shelter. It's a homeless charity in the UK. And actually, my friends in that band, Andy and Debbie, we've been working on a rock opera during the pandemic, and I'm really trying to get that. I'm trying to get it on a stage somewhere around the world, hopefully in England. We've written a rock opera. We've been trying to get it so we can workshop it somewhere, but the music is great. So that's kind of one of the main things I had been focusing on lately.
Wow.
I mean, I've had a bunch of meetings so far with different people in the UK about it.
And it's called Songs from the
Big Smoke, which is a metaphor for London.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Changed course here. How did you become a musician, Clem? Or how did you get started as a drummer?
Well, there was a piano in my house. My mom did play the piano, and she'd always have the top 40 radio on in the 60s, singing along to the Four Seasons or Motown and things like that. And my dad actually was a drummer. He had a band. He had it with his two brothers and his father. They sort of had like a social society, like wedding type band. So I guess it's in my music has kind of been in my DNA. And I mean, anybody of my generation, once the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, that was it. That was kind of that was like when the the shoe dropped, as they say, or whatever. The Beatles were the inspiration. And I mean, the Beatles were like four rock and roll stars. They all stood out. They were just like, and they also seemed, they were from like another place, that had nothing to do with my hometown in New Jersey. And it was just like, they seemed very unusual and exciting. I mean, I liked the Four Seasons before that. I mean, when we were at school, there would always be fights like who was more popular, the Four Seasons or the Beatles back when. But the Beatles, I mean, anybody in my generation always cites Beatles on Ed Sullivan was the dropping off point, the starting point to want to be a musician, want to be a rock and roll star, really.
So
I always wanted to be more than a musician. I kind of wanted to be, like the Beatles or like the New York Dolls or something,
So you, at what age, what grade in school did you first join a band or start a band?
Well, in high school, I had bands. When I was 14 years old, I played at Carnegie Hall.
What?
Because there was a DJ in New York called Bruce Morrow, cousin Bruce Morrow. And they used to have a thing on his station WABC called Cousin Brucey's Big Break, where like high school bands would send in a tape to WABC, and if they liked your tape, they actually it was the first time I was in a professional recording studio. It was in ABC Studios on West 57th Street.
Wow!
Recorded a cover of a song by Blood, Sweat, and Tears called "Something's Going On."
I know the song.
And that recording, pretty progressive for a bunch of 13 and 14-year-old kids. And so you record that song, and then they play that on the air on Cousin Brucey's Big Break. And then, the public votes, and a handful of bands are nominated to go into a live battle of the bands, essentially, which was usually held at like a ballroom at a Hilton or something in New York City, or, hotel ballroom somewhere. But for this year that we were involved, for some reason, it was held at Carnegie Hall. So at 14 years old, I played live on stage at Carnegie Hall. But then, so I was like, where am I going to go from here? I'm already at the pinnacle of, success playing Carnegie Hall.
That's amazing.
And that was what my high school band that I had my first 2 years of high school.
So did your mom and dad come to Carnegie?
Oh, yeah,
Hall
absolutely. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. My mom and dad were very supportive of me. My dad used to drive the van for the band when, we were all underage, because we would constantly do gigs on the weekends at, CYO centers or Jewish community centers or private parties. And I mean, I was always in bands from the time I was about 13 years old. And we'd always win Battle of the Bands and things like that.
Yeah.
And then, we would play on the weekends in high school gymnasiums or in, it's kind of like my social life and, the whole deal.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm kind of speechless here.
Yeah, it was memorable. I still recall just looking out at the audience, from behind the curtain as a little kid, as a young teenager. It's pretty exciting.
So because of this, did you study hard in school, or you're just like, I'm going to be a musician? And
well, I have no idea how I made it into college, really, because I wasn't really that interested in school and high school, but somehow I was going to school, working, and in Blondie all simultaneously at one point. So I kind of had almost a 20-hour day. I would get up and go to school, then go to work, and then play at CBGB at night. I mean, that went on maybe for about a year or so.
Wow, that's a tough schedule.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So
but I could do it. I did it.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think back. I often think of how did I do that? There's things that have happened, but I think back, how did I ever do that? That would kill me today.
Especially at CBGB back in the day, if you headlined, you played at midnight and 2 a.m. because the clubs were open until 4. So you kind of have to take a disco nap, before you get out. You didn't really go out till midnight in New York City in the 70s. Kind of like midnight to 6 a.m. would be the kind of regular kind of schedule to be out in New York back then.
Wow. So you've been to Japan before, right? I know you have.
Several times.
Several times. So
actually, the last time I was there, I had a band a couple of years ago called the Empty Hearts.
Yes,
and we
know.
played at Billboard Live.
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
Yeah. You and a lot of other people didn't know that, but we did play there. As a band I had with a member of the Romantics, a guy called Wally Palmer, and another guy called Andy Buke, who had a band called the Chesterfield Kings, a garage rock band, and the guitarist was Elliot Easton from the Cars.
Wow.
We did 2 albums.
I've played Empty Hearts on my radio show.
Oh, right. Great. Yeah.
I don't know who sent it to me, but somebody had to send it to me. Okay. Anyway, so we're going to come back to part 2 with this very interesting talk with Clem Burke. This is the Mike Rogers Show. If you like this talk, go down here and click like and subscribe. And we'll be back here tomorrow with Mr. Clem Burke from Blondie. Thanks, Clem.
All right, Mike.